are off air. Much of the Solomons' capital, Honiara, is still without power. Georgina Kikea says she's still feeling dizzy from the quake, which knocked over computer monitors and filing cabinets in offices. Ms Kikea says there was a lot of panic along the main street when the quake struck.
Parents are ones that were panicking this afternoon. It was chaotic along the main highway, especially parents trying to get to the kids. And I've called and checked for my youngest one. They are safe. They're okay. So I guess that's the worry mostly for most parents, especially at this time.
Georgina Kikea says an accurate picture of the extent of the damage won't be known for some time. The National Emergency Management Authority says there was no tsunami warning for New Zealand. It says it will keep a close eye on the situation, but at this stage there is no immediate threat. The Property Investors Federation says the extension to the Healthy Homes deadline is a smokescreen for the failures of the government's housing agency to meet the standards. Private landlords will now have until July 2025 to get their rentals up to scratch. Kāinga Ora has until July 2024. The government says COVID disruption has delayed construction projects, including housing upgrades. However, the Federation's Vice President, Peter Lewis, says most private landlords were on track to meet the original deadline.
We're a bit miffed that, we have made the efforts, we've spent the money, we've put the effort in to reach the deadline that was set. And here is the government who tend to be a sort of a high cost and not very efficient landlord. They are the ones who are dragging the chain in our view.
Renters United says the deferrals will mean more people hospitalised with preventable illnesses. The main nurses' union is urging Wellington Hospital not to carry out a witch hunt for the nurse who gave the health minister's details to a patient. The hospital has called on the practice to stop and says it will investigate after the nurse handed out a laminated card with Andrew Little's office contacts. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
The nurse gave the card to a woman who was shocked at how busy and overrun the department was, so she could let Andrew Little know directly about her experience. The nurses' organisation says the nurse clearly felt she had no other option and it will protect anyone disciplined as a result of the action. The union says instead of a witch hunt, Te Whatu Ora Health NZ should fix the problem of under-resourced hospitals and emergency departments.
In news dust to hand, the dog walker attacked in a Christchurch park last week has died. The man was found with multiple stab wounds about 6:20 a.m. last Monday near the entrance of Bexley Park. Police say he passed away at Christchurch Hospital today. Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves says police extend their sincere condolences to the victim's family and friends. She says this is an understandably traumatic time and police are working closely with next of kin as the investigation progresses. An 18-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman were arrested in relation to the assault. Police are reviewing charges following the man's death. And the ACT Party has vowed to fight against dropping the voting age to 16 for general elections, but isn't too worried about the same change for local body elections. A bill proposing the change for general elections is doomed to fail, as it would need 75% support in the House. However, the door's still open to lower the age for local body elections, and that would only need as a straight parliamentary majority to pass. ACT leader David Seymour is staunchly opposed to younger people voting in general elections, but not so much for local government.
Well, I guess you can't do quite as much damage electing a bad council as you can electing a bad government, so not a bad place to try the training wheels.
The Supreme Court yesterday ruled that the current voting age of 18 was unjustified age discrimination. In sport, the Black Caps must win tonight's third and final T20 cricket match against India in Napier if they're to level the series. India have a 1-0 lead, having convincingly won Game 2 in Mount Maunganui by 65 runs after the opening match in Wellington was washed out. Tim Southee will lead the Black Caps in Kane Williamson's absence. Heavy rain is, however, forecast ahead of the game, which is due to start at 7:30 p.m. The two sides also play a 3-match one-day series. The first game is in Auckland on Friday, with Williamson due back for that. Wales' all-time leading goal scorer Gareth Bale scored a late penalty as the Welsh secured a 1-1 draw with the United States in their opening match at the Football World Cup in Qatar. In today's other match, England beat Iran 6-2 and the Netherlands beat Senegal 2-0. Tonight, Argentina play Saudi Arabia, while tomorrow morning Denmark play Tunisia and France play Australia. The chief men's and women's Super Rugby sides will play in the same home jersey next year. The franchise says the move will solidify Manawa as a core part of the Chiefs club. The New Zealand squash player Joelle King has risen one spot to number 4 in the world rankings after success in New Zealand and Singapore in recent weeks. And the Golden State Warriors are being sued by an FTX customer who's accusing the reigning NBA basketball champs of fraudulently promoting the now bankrupt cryptocurrency exchange. That's the news.
What should the voting age be?
You've got to draw the line somewhere, and 18 has been appropriate. We think it works well.
I don't know. How many centuries did women not have the vote for?
The mystery of a Tongan volcano.
The volcano was completely intact. That was absolutely surprised us, because if it was intact, then what was the violent mechanism? What caused that violence?
And should we give out Phil's number?
It's quite a confusing
You're
rhyme.
appealing for information on this programme, aren't you, Phil?
Yes, I am.
Phil Paddington. Shall I give out your number? The Big Questions morning report weekdays from 6 here on RNZ National.
We're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, Waikato and the Bay of Plenty. Periods of rain, some heavy falls with thunderstorms and northerly gales. Showers becoming isolated tomorrow with strong westerlies. From Waipomo to Kapiti, also the central high country. Rain with possible thunderstorms and downpours spreading south this afternoon and evening. Showers tomorrow, possibly thundery at times, strong to gale northwesterlies in exposed places. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Waded Upper and Wellington, rain developing this afternoon or evening, possibly heavy. Clearing tomorrow, but late rain for Wellington. Northwest gales tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, isolated showers turning to rain this evening, becoming fine tomorrow morning, then rain returning in the evening. Buller, Westland, Fiordland, periods of rain with heavy and possibly thundery falls. Canterbury, partly cloudy. Otago and Southland, showers possibly heavy, thunderstorms possible during the afternoons and evenings. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, rain developing tonight, clearing tomorrow evening. The time is 8 minutes past 5. I'll have news headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Private landlords have been given an early Christmas present, an extra year to bring their rentals up to healthy homes standards. The government has extended the deadline, saying supply chain disruptions have made it hard for landlords to get heat pumps and other things they need to meet the standards. But it's also given itself an extended deadline to bring public housing up to scratch. Our political reporter Annika Smith reports.
There was a sea of nodding heads at Te Papa last week as property managers grilled a political panel about healthy home standards at their annual conference. They argued it was unfair to have one deadline for private landlords and another for their public counterparts.
There is a feeling amongst the room, wasn't it the government's responsibility to lead by example and get the government housing stock more compliant because it's protecting those more vulnerable in need tenants?
Fast forward a week to the Housing Minister Megan Woods announcing the government is levelling the playing field.
We're giving private and public landlords more time to comply with the Healthy Home Standard as COVID-19 has affected the rollout with supply chain and also with labour shortages. Kaingaora and private landlords are in the same boat.
Private landlords now have until July 2025 to get their rentals up to scratch. An extension also given to Kāinga Ora, which has until July 2024. National's housing spokesperson Chris Bishop says it's little comfort for landlords who've already done the mahi.
The vast majority of private sector landlords have done the right thing. They've complied with the rules. Now it turns out the government can't actually comply with their own rules, so they've given themselves a leave pass and pushed that deadline back. So it's one rule for the government and another rule for private sector landlords, and I think it will be regarded as a real slap in the face by the private sector.
Renters United say it's a slap in the face for renters. They're less than impressed with the deferral, saying more people will be hospitalised with preventable illnesses. But the Property Investors Federation Vice President, Peter Lewis, says private landlords are also unhappy, the majority having put in the work to meet the original deadline.
We're a bit miffed that, we have made the efforts, we've spent the money, we've put the effort in to reach the deadline that was set. And here is the government who tend to be a sort of a high cost and not very efficient landlord. They are the ones who are dragging the chain in our view.
Also announced today was the regulation of property managers and public consultation on how to best manage homes contaminated by methamphetamine. Peter Lewis says it makes sense to regulate a profession that manages other people's money, but private landlords are desperate to see meth management in homes sorted out once and for all.
At the moment, we're like a driver driving down a road where we don't know what the speed limit is. So we've been pushing for a few years to try and get a definitive figure on this so we can know exactly what level it is set at and work back from there.
A bill to extend the deadlines for healthy home standards is being introduced to Parliament today, with the intention of passing it into law before the year is out.
And joining us now is Renters United spokesperson Geordie Rogers. Kia ora, Geordie.
Kia ora, thanks for having me on.
So private landlords in Kāinga Ora exempt from registering as property managers. What's the problem with that?
I mean, really the basic problem with that is that these people are providing services to renters, and right now there are very weak regulations in place in order to be able to hold them to account. They can continue practicing property management, providing properties to renters, even if they continue to abuse the rights of them.
Should there be a benchmark? Like, is only one property enough, rental property enough to force someone to register, or should there be a higher benchmark?
One property is definitely a high enough benchmark. When you think about the amount of control that a landlord has over the renter's life, where they can live, how long they can live there for, what standard their rental property is in, when they get visits from the landlord, there's such an immense amount of detail and a power imbalance in that relationship that really does need a code of conduct, and it does need a way to hold people who abuse that code of conduct to account.
Minister said today that private landlords are covered by the Tenancy Tribunal. Is that not enough?
So they are currently covered by the Tenancy Tribunal, but in terms of actually getting access to the Tenancy Tribunal, tenants are often working very long hours. There's lots of hours that has to go into preparing a tribunal case. You then have to get time off at work to appear at the tribunal. Even if you win your case at the tribunal, there is no way for you to force the landlord to pay out what you're awarded if you happen to win. And so that landlord can continue being a landlord, never pay up those fines, and continue renting out properties. So in terms of actually making sure that people who are flaunting the laws are held to account, there's very little of that right now. And property management regulation is the way to go, as we've seen in examples like Rent Smart Wales.
So, whenever regulation comes up around rentals, one of the main things that is brought up to push back is that if you bring in too much red tape, people will abandon renting their houses out and there won't be as many properties on the market. Your response?
My response to that is your job as a landlord or a property manager is to rent a property at a standard that meets a renter's right to a decent home. If you can't meet that standard, whether it's because you don't have enough money or you have organised your capital in a way that means you don't have enough cash flow, then that means you shouldn't be a landlord. You can't provide that service. And someone who has the ability to provide that service can step in, or in many cases that can go to someone who's prepared and ready to own a home and provide that service for themselves.
Supply problems. Heat pumps are hard to get by. Insulation is hard to lay your hands on, apparently. So the government's pushing out the deadline for healthy home requirements another year for both Kāinga Ora and private landlords. What kind of message do you reckon that sends?
The message that it sends is if you back in 2019 decided not to upgrade your house now and instead wait until the very last minute when you have to and just think that there's no consequences for that, Actually, you were right. There are no consequences for that because the government doesn't want to hold you to account. They don't want to ensure that renters are living in healthy, warm, dry housing. What they do want to do is make sure that landlords are not getting fined. And I think that sends a message to all of those landlords who have complied, who have upgraded their homes and made sure that their renters aren't getting sick, that all of their effort has gone unnoticed.
What are the other consequences of not doing it? Because obviously it's called healthy homes for a reason.
Yeah, so the reason the Healthy Home Standards came in is because it cost the government around $13 billion a year in health costs due to the fact that the standards didn't exist. Rental housing, by and large, is of a worse quality than owner-occupied housing. But of course, on the other side of that, it's not just about money, it's the fact that that cost comes from renters with preventable illnesses going to hospital, getting things like rheumatic fever in children or asthma in adults. These are all things that can be prevented and should be prevented through good regulation that doesn't have added delays to it.
Appreciate your time, Geordie. Good to speak to you. That's Geordie Rogers, who is from Renters United. It is 16 minutes after 5. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And also send us your thoughts on that one. Further delayed healthy home requirements and private landlords won't have to register and meet these new standards for property managers. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The campaign to lower the voting age for general elections is dead in the water, but 16-year-olds might get a vote at the local body level. Yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled the voting age of 18 was inconsistent with the Bill of Rights Act, but the road to change is a rocky one. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
16-year-olds might not have the vote yet, but Labour MPs are beginning their campaign of flattery early.
16 and 17-year-olds are often some of the most thoughtful people about the future challenges facing the country.
These young people today that we have are amazing.
I think there'll be more informed voting will take place between 16 and 18 than probably does afterward.
Mate, I've met plenty of 16 and 17-year-olds that are way smarter than me and I can participate, so why not?
The government is drawing up legislation to lower the voting age to 16 after the Supreme Court yesterday declared the limit at 18 had not been justified. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern wants a change, as do most of her caucus. But David Parker and Willie Jackson are among the few holdouts.
So I'm happy with 18.
I think it would be good if they got involved in politics, but I just wonder in terms of their priorities, whether they're really there.
Lucky for them, they'll be free to vote how they wish. Jacinda Ardern says Labour won't be whipping its MPs behind one position.
So people will be able to cast their vote as they choose.
Ultimately, though, it's not going to matter. The voting age for general elections has special protection. Any change requires a referendum or a 75% vote in Parliament. That's 90 MPs. Both National and ACT have come out against the move, meaning even with the Greens and Māori Party in support, it is impossible to reach that threshold.
You've got to rule the line somewhere, and on balance we think it's about right.
18 is the age at which I think most New Zealanders say, yep, at 18 you're an adult, and I think it's the age at which we should say, yep, now you're an adult, you can vote.
To be honest with you, most 18-year-olds aren't that interested in politics or governance.
Their opposition ends any chance of wholesale change, but a small window remains open for local body elections. Unlike general elections, the voting age for councils can be changed with a simple majority vote in Parliament, and that would be much easier to achieve. Labour has signalled it could be open to a sort of trial run.
Haven't ruled that out. Key for us, I think. We need to get a bit of advice on that.
I think local government does offer an opportunity potentially to road test it.
I've always felt quite positively disposed towards having a bit of a look at local government in the first instance.
And the idea has some surprise backing from ex-David Seymour.
I guess you can't do quite as much damage electing a bad council as you can electing a bad government, so not a bad place to try the trainer wheels.
A review of local government last month also recommended the voting age be dropped to 16. A glimmer of hope then for young campaigners, but still a lot of detail to be nutted out. The next local body election is in 2025. MPs will make their decision next year.
And that's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch. We'll have more on this issue later in the programme. Do send us your thoughts. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A very strong and shallow earthquake has struck in the Solomon Islands just south of Honiara. The US Geological Survey says the magnitude 7.3 quake had a depth of just 10 kilometres. It comes as hospitals in Indonesia struggle with hundreds of people injured after a major earthquake that has killed at least 160 people. The magnitude 5.6 quake struck near the town of Cianjur in West Java, and there are fears the death toll could rise sharply, with many people still missing. Images show dozens of buildings have collapsed and emergency services are scrambling to find survivors buried in the rubble. The ABC's Rachel Mealy reports.
The quake struck in the afternoon in the city of Cianjur, southeast of Jakarta. The imam at a local mosque was leading a prayer. Footage shows him struggling to remain on his feet as the building sways violently around him. In the immediate aftermath, people are seen emerging from their damaged homes. These men shout for help to free a child who's trapped under the rubble. Power and communications were cut across a vast area. Hospitals soon became overwhelmed with the injured. Many were treated outside, lying on blankets in car parks and on footpaths. Landslides have been reported across the region too. Roads are cut and in many places rescuers can't get through. Herman Suerman is the head of Cianjur's local government. He says some of the most badly affected areas haven't yet been accessed and they'll need heavy equipment to get through. There's still an area that's not been evacuated, which is Mangun, he says. Because the road is completely blocked by a landslide, they cannot be evacuated yet. The Red Cross says its staff are travelling to the harder-to-reach areas on motorbikes. Local television footage shows people camping on the streets of Cianjur outside their wrecked homes.
When it happened, I was at home and I got out quick. I heard something crash and everything was flattened.
It is 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know your thoughts on voting for 16 and 17-year-olds, local body elections. That's still afloat, that idea. And also the government stalling on healthy homes requirements. It's time we go to the headlines now. Anea Iwi, mena pita kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. Solomon Islands residents are being advised to stay vigilant following an earthquake off the coast of Guadalcanal. The US Geological Survey has now revised the magnitude down from an initial 7.3 to 6. Authorities in the Solomon Islands say there's no major damage and no tsunami threat, but they are urging people to move to higher ground because of the unusual currents. The National Emergency Management Authority says there was no tsunami warning for New Zealand. It says it will keep a close eye on the situation, but at this stage there is no immediate threat. The dog walker attacked in a Christchurch park last week has died. Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves says this is an understandably traumatic time for the victim's family and friends, and police are working closely with next of kin as the investigation progresses. The Property Investors Federation says the extension to the Healthy Homes deadline is a smokescreen for the failures of the government's housing agency to meet the standards. Vice President Peter Lewis says most private landlords were on track to meet the original deadline. The nurses' organisation says Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand should instead fix the problem of under-resourced hospitals and emergency departments instead of carrying out a witch hunt for a nurse who gave the Health Minister's details to a patient. And ACT leader David Seymour is vowing to fight against dropping the voting age to 16 for general elections, but says he isn't too worried about the same change for local body elections. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in the South Island, State Highway 1 south of Seddon and Marlborough, a serious crash just before 5 p.m. has closed the road near Blind River Loop Road. And in the north, in the Wellington region, there is still a strong winds warning in place for Remutaka Hill. Those are the headlines, and and traffic. I'll have more of that at 5:40.
Kia ora rā, Eho. Football's world governing body, FIFA, has threatened to sanction any captain who wears the One Love armband during the World Cup. The multicoloured armband supports diversity and inclusion, especially for the LGBT plus community. Same-sex relationships are illegal in Qatar, where the World Cup is being hosted. Captains from 7 European countries had planned to wear the armband during the tournament, but have now made a U-turn. We're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. OK, so what's FIFA's plan for punishing these teams if they do wear an armband?
So the sanctions that have come out, that was only a couple of hours before England were to play their game against Iran. So all of these captains previously, right up until the start of the tournament, were very prepared to wear this armband. And what FIFA has said, or what their sanction is saying, is that it will be a yellow card for a player who wears it in the field of play, which this is a bit of a problem for these players because cards accumulate during a World Cup. So yellow card today when you play, and then the next game you wear it again, you could end up with a suspension and being tossed out of a game without even really doing any foul play on the field, heading into the latter stages of the tournament. So FIFA normally sanctions something like this if you wear the wrong kit. It's normally a fine, which is something that Germany and England said that they were prepared to pay, but they just can't have their captain, I guess, getting this yellow card or getting the suspension potentially for standing up for these human rights on this issue. This was something that they say that they were very prepared to wear this armband, but I guess that looking at what FIFA's imposing is just too much for them now.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of pushback has there been against FIFA? Because other big sports competitions have allowed players to protest through uniforms. NBA, Black Lives Matter, you know, the taping on rugby players' wrists where they write messages supporting particular causes. So what kind of pushback has FIFA had against this? Because it seems a bit last minute and quite harsh.
It's written into the rules for FIFA that actually anything that you have on any part of your kit can't have a political, religious or personal statement or slogan. So I guess that's already written into their rules, which is why I guess they can stand up now and say this is part of it. They've, in response, have released their own armbands as well, which...
OK, tell us about those,
So they've got their own messages, which I guess they are saying that they're prepared for the 32 captains of all of the teams to wear. So it's hashtag no discrimination, hashtag save the planet, hashtag protect children, hashtag education for all, and hashtag be active. So some very different messages that FIFA are prepared to allow the captains or players to wear out on the field.
And do we know whether they are going to be worn, those armbands, yet?
So Harry Kane, the England captain this morning, did switch it out and wear that hashtag no discrimination instead of the rainbow armband. I guess that he was One Love armband that he was supposed to be wearing or wanted to be wearing.
Yeah. Let's move on to rugby. Crusaders coach Scott Robertson has made an impression as coach of the Barbarians, with one player suggesting he should be the next coach of England.
Yes, after working with Robertson, former England fullback Mike Brown has said that this is the person that he has the right attributes to be the next England coach. He says in a column that he wrote, Mike Brown says that a lot of coaches have that tactical or technical ability, but it's actually the connection with players that he sees Robertson being a point of difference, and that he would be really connecting with the England players, which is something that Brown said that they probably need. It's he's referenced here one of those Adele sing-alongs that they had at the Barbarians camp. I don't know, maybe he thinks England need to learn to sing more of their own singers, I don't know. But something like that is, I guess it was that kind of light-hearted aspect that maybe Scott Robertson's known for, that perhaps some of these other coaches, because it would be seen as a three-horse race to be the next England coach to replace Eddie Jones after the next year's World Cup. So that's Ireland's Ronan O'Gara and Leicester Tigers coach Steve Warwick are the two that are, I guess, in the discussions with Robertson. It is understood and reported that England have been in touch with Robertson about whether he would want to be the next England coach. He is contracted with the Crusaders until the end of 2024, but he can leave at the end of 2023 if he doesn't get the All Blacks job.
Interesting stuff, Felicity. Thank you for that. Felicity Reid, sports reporter there. Rock band The Killers rolled the dice at their Auckland concert last night when they invited an apparently random drummer on stage to give it a bash. And it turns out Taylor Johnston, well, he killed it. The 22-year-old Wellingtonian turned up at the concert stadium last night with a sign begging The Killers to let him drum their hit for reasons unknown. And who would have believed it unless somebody told me? They did exactly exactly that, but it is not the first time. And when we caught up with Taylor Johnston, he was still flying high.
I was just on a different plane of existence last night after that, so yeah, I'm only starting to feel it now.
Talk me through the moment. You're up there on stage, you're absolutely going for it. What are you thinking about? What do you remember?
So I guess main thing I was thinking was, I'm here to do a job. People want to see the Killers, and I'm very lucky to be here. So, for the love of God, do not screw it up.
So you did have some nerves?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, they're big shoes to fill.
And what did you say to the guys? You were huddled in front of the drum kit. There was a bit of a conversation. What words were exchanged before you got up there and started playing?
Well, Brandon was just making sure that I knew what I was doing. And he was saying, yeah, you've practiced, you're not nervous to play in front of this many people. All right, okay, get up there, I suppose. And I got round the back and spoke to Ronnie, and he basically just said, all right, keep an eye on me and keep it simple.
He was gracious because it's one of their big numbers, right? Pretty gracious
absolutely.
for him to get up out of the chair for you.
For sure.
So how did you get there in the first place? What was your plan, your strategy?
So I made a sign that said, I'm Taylor from Wellington and I want to drum for reasons unknown. It's about as straightforward as you can be. I lined up for several hours. I got there about lunchtime, so I was right at the front as soon as the doors opened. And yeah, every time Brendan Flowers came over to our side, I just held the sign up in his face. And yeah, the rest is history.
You had some pretty good backup. Your mates were, pretty encouraging, weren't they?
Well, yeah, my band was actually there with me. So my band were there and my mum and dad were also there. So, sort of the biggest supports in my life all around me.
What is it like to play with the Killers?
Godlike. That's the best way I can describe it.
Tell me more. In what way?
I don't know. I feel like the Killers are a band who, at the risk of sounding a bit eye-rolly, they really tap into the universe. They've got just out of this world amazing songs, very ethereal. Brandon is from another realm of existence. So being up there and sort of just tapping into that, even just for one song, you don't feel human. I can say that much.
When did you decide to do this, to give it a crack?
Well, interesting you say that because I've actually done it once before. When they came to Wellington back in 2018, so I would have been 17 back then, I did the same thing. There was no staging or prior planning or anything. I just took a sign that said, I want to drum for reasons unknown. And yeah, same story. They saw me and they got me up. They took a chance on me. Yeah.
You're bloody chill for a guy who just played with the Killers.
Oh, I might sound chill. There's a lot going on inside me right now.
What? What's going on inside you, Taylor? What are your thoughts and feelings about it?
A lot of nitpicking. My dad filmed it for me, and I've gone back and watched it and gone, little bits that I wish I'd played better. But also at the same time, holy crap, okay, that's me with the Killers. Yeah.
What next?
Crazy.
What next for Taylor Johnston, two-time drummer with the Killers? What do you do after that? What's the encore?
The encore? Well, basically I am going to use this as an opportunity to say that I am in a band. We're called Holloway. We're based out of Wellington. We're in Auckland and Hamilton all the time playing shows. And if you want to know what's next for me, you want to hear more from me, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you get your stuff, it's all there. That's where all my attention goes. So that's
Good
where
plug,
Taylor's going
Taylor.
next.
Good plug, seizing the moment once again. So at the end, what did they say to you? Anything?
Yeah, well, because I noticed when I went up initially, they weren't standoffish, but they were hesitant. And yeah, after we finished, Brandon sort of came over and gave me a hug, and he was just like, "Yeah, all right, you done good, kid. You done good."
So if Brandon wanted to come along and sing back up for you, would that be okay?
Oh no, we'd kick my singer out if Brandon wanted to. We just let Brandon take over.
Ruthless drummer and sometimes Killers extra, Taylor Johnston, and let's take a listen. And that is Taylor Johnston drumming with the Killers. And what you can hear in the background is his mates going off as they film it. It is 25 minutes to 6 and our resident rocker, Nona Peltier, is here with the business news. Ko taku hoa e naine, ko Nona Peltier, who was actually at the Killers concert, weren't you, Nona?
I was. You could probably hear my voice in the background.
Screaming,
there. We were
cheering
all
him on.
screaming and cheering him on. Absolutely. It was awesome.
Pretty cool moment.
It was really a wonderful concert. It was just fantastic. My friend who was with me said it was the best concert she'd ever been to.
And what an experience for a young musician.
I know, it was amazing. At first I thought, oh, is this part of the act? But no, and he was just great. Really good.
Well, that's good. So your music review for Taylor is?
100%.
Top, thumbs up. Okay, yep. Should we move on to cars, right?
Why not? Let's just talk about cars now.
Yeah.
Something
Automotive.
else.
Yeah, so Turners, right? Tina from Turners, that's all I think of when I think
do
of
you
Turners.
really?
Yeah,
okay, that's obviously working for you then.
They have reported a steady half-year profit, and what's the reason for that?
Well, we talked to them earlier about how their market was going. They had sort of flagged that that's how their result was going to go, so it wasn't really a surprise. However, the outlook is pretty positive. They're saying that they're expecting used cars to continue to fetch high prices, that because of consumer sentiment changing, economic conditions and so on, new cars are less favored at the moment, and also new car sales yards are bringing in used cars because that's what's attracting the consumers right now. They're really looking to save money on those big ticket items.
And shall we go on to commercial property investors? A lot of talk about rentals and what have you. But commercial property investors, they're hit by a drop in market values as well.
Yeah, so in this case, the company we're talking about is Argosy. So their first half profit was well down on last year. So they made a net profit of $10.7 million, which is still a reasonable profit, but it was versus $127 million the year earlier. And that's because of a significant difference. So the year earlier, they had a net valuation gain of $91.7 million. But this time around, it was a $23.5 million drop. So that's the difference. With property companies, they have to account for valuation gains or losses, and that's what happened there. So they didn't have the gain, plus they went down a bit. But that's not a surprise because we've seen that across the board with property companies, and of course homeowners would also know that that's the case. So what was interesting, though, when I was speaking to the folks at Argosy, is the demand for green buildings. So these are buildings that have attributes which are more than, your average office.
I'm just thinking composting toilet right now, Nona.
Yeah. Okay, well, that could be one thing. Who knows? But it's probably more like nice environment to hang out, sustainable buildings, good quality air, etc. Those kinds of things. Because that's what's taking what businesses want to bring their staff back into the offices, because people have become quite comfortable hanging out at home. So to get them back in the office, there are more demands on companies to really meet those, I guess, expectations that people have about what they want. Some more flexibility in the buildings. But as a result of that, they're attracting far higher rents. And Argosy had a long history of developing in green buildings, moving in that direction. So they have a very large portfolio of that, and that's benefited them. So they had a gain in their underlying profit. And from that, they got, $32 million funds from their operations versus $25.5 the year before. Pretty good.
And Nona, what news do you bring from the markets, please?
Well, Well, I just want to say automotive company Turner's, their share price rose 1%, and Argos's, it went up 3.7%. So the market was happy with that. Top 50 index, though, it fell by 20 points to 11,420. Not really a surprise. We're seeing a lot of turbulence in financial markets because of this uncertainty of what's going on in China with COVID. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the US dollar all the time is over the top. Never mind, though. Our New Zealand dollar still is steady at 61.2 US cents, slightly down from yesterday, but just a bit, and a little bit higher against the Australian dollar at 92.5 cents, and steady as usual against the British pound at 51.6.
Thank you, Nona. Nona Peltier, full-time business reporter, sometime concert reviewer. Thank you for that. It is 20 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of it coming in about healthy homes or lack thereof. This person says rental agencies need standards for their service. I know of a rental agency that has approved tenants for a property and has secured no rent for 3 months. The property is damaged. Owner's got tenants out. Property agency, very poor service. Everyone has to be careful. Another listener says the healthy homes is a bare minimum. Landlords need to realise it's a job and not free money for having a house. They should have pride in maintaining their home and looking out for their renters. And a landlord has got in touch to say, I own 3 rental properties. I lived in terrible damp flats when I was young. I make a real effort for my homes to be warm and dry with log burners, heat pumps and insulation. All are signed off at Healthy Homes Code. It was not hard to do, and I agree with your guest that it is the responsibility of every landlord. If you cannot afford to provide a healthy rental, then stop being a landlord. And this one, before we move on, we have a rental house that we scrambled to upgrade so it complies with the regulations. We live in a house that does not comply, nor have we ever lived in a house that would comply with these regulations. We are 73 years old and have been landlords for more than 40 years. So do keep your feedback coming. 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Homai o whakaaro, we do love to hear from you. Send us your feedback on anything you've heard on the program. Text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Let's get to Evie, who's been waiting patiently with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Much of the Solomons capital, Honiara, is still without power after being rocked by a magnitude 6 earthquake off the coast of Guadalcanal. A local reporter based in Honiara, Georgina Kekea, says there was a lot of panic along the main street when the quake struck. She says there's not been any major damage, but there are ongoing tremors. Police are reviewing charges following the death of the dog walker attacked in a Christchurch park last week. The man was found with multiple stab wounds about 6:20 a.m. last Monday near the entrance of Bexley Park. An 18-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman were arrested last week in relation to the assault. Police say the man passed away at Christchurch Hospital today. Renters advocates say the government is letting landlords delay meeting healthy home standards. The government has extended the deadline until 2026, giving landlords an extra year to prepare. But Renters United spokesperson Geordie Rogers says the extension means more tenants would be hospitalised with rheumatic fever and asthma. And Aucklanders are bracing for rush hour as nasty thunderstorms approach the North Island. Auckland Transport has issued a high wind alert for the Harbour Bridge. Lanes could close between 8 o'clock and midnight tonight. AT is advising high-sided vehicles and motorcyclists to avoid the bridge and use the Western Ring route on State Highways 16 and 18. And in other traffic news, still in Auckland, a breakdown in a southbound lane of the Waterview Tunnel has been pushed clear of lanes, but may still be causing some backups if you are trying to take State Highway 16. Moving down the country, Dimutaka Hill in Wellington has a strong wind warning in place. And in the South Island, State Highway 1 south of Seddon and Marlborough, a serious crash just before 5 p.m. has closed the road near Blind River Loop Road. There is no detour available, so please avoid the area if you can. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Kia ora rā, Eho. Political parties are busy sharing their opinions on the proposal to lower the voting age to 16 in the wake of the Supreme Court decision. While they're unlikely to get the vote for general elections, they may get to have their say at the local body level. Louise Tanous spoke to some 16 and 17-year-olds to see what they think about it.
At James Cook High School in Tamaki Makaurau, these students have just finished their morning exams. The room is full of 16 and 17-year-olds, all too young to vote right now. Some think that should change.
We should be able to speak up for ourselves because even though our generation is still young, we still should have a vote and say.
Yes, because it gives people my age a chance to speak up for what they want.
But some are split on whether they're ready to cast their vote.
Mixed opinions on it. Yes, because it kind of allows us to have a voice as well, but no as well because it also allows some that are not as mature. I think I would have a proper serious vote compared to where some wouldn't.
I don't think I'm at the stage where I'm able to look for what I want and am mature enough. I'm not sure if I'm mature enough.
So what issues do they feel most strongly about and would drive who gets their vote? For most, the answer was poverty and education.
Some people can't focus because their parents let them down or other people bully them into letting them down. And I think that's one of the big issues for me because I feel like I should see everyone succeed in life and be the best that they can.
Outside Wellington High School, these students feel ready to vote.
I do want a say in the country I live in.
I think it's important to have young people's voices heard.
I feel like all adults, they don't care about our future. I feel like I really want to have a say on my government since it's the government that I'm going to grow up to be a part of.
Others seem unfazed.
To be honest, at my age, I feel like government stuff doesn't really bother me.
I just don't think I'm old enough. I'm kind of just indifferent. I don't really mind.
For the capital city, it's the environment that's front of mind.
Climate change and saving the environment and the world we live in.
Climate change is still quite important.
Definitely environmental sake, because when I grow up, I don't want to be in obviously a really horrible climate and everything.
In Christchurch CBD, these students say the maturity debate is a hard one to solve.
Some 16-year-olds are probably mature enough for it, but then also other 16-year-olds are not at all. Then there are stupid adults as well. I feel like we should be allowed to vote because we're the ones that have the most opinion on climate crisis and all that stuff. It's going to affect us. I don't know anything about politics. Personally, I feel like I shouldn't be allowed to vote for it because I don't know anything. So people younger than me, I know a lot of 16-year-olds who have got zero idea about voting.
And they want to see more civic education in schools.
But they need to be educating us on this first. I feel like if schools actually taught us about voting and we had the resources to understand what our vote meant, then we should be allowed to.
Unfortunately for them, the idea is unlikely to fly, with National and ACT against the age being lowered.
Louise Tanuth reporting there. Nationals ignoring the weight of evidence against enforced military-style camps for young offenders. That's according to a lawyer representing survivors of some of the country's worst cases of abuse in state care. Amanda Hill says forcing kids into boot camps won't stop them reoffending. Tom Taylor has the report.
The National Party's police spokesperson Mark Mitchell says boot camps have the potential to turn young people's lives around. He points to the success of limited service volunteer courses run by the Defence Force, where 18 to 24-year-olds spend 6 weeks at military camps, learning discipline and gaining self-esteem. But lawyer and advocate for survivors of abuse in state care Amanda Hill says National's model differs from the LSV program in several key ways. For one, it's much longer, up to a year versus 6 weeks. Its participants could be much younger, at 15 to 17 years old. And most importantly, Ms Hill says, kids would be pushed into the program rather than volunteering.
It's been going on for decades, this idea that you just punish harder and the crime will stop, which is misplaced. It doesn't.
Ms Hill presented evidence on behalf of many survivors of whakapakari, a boot camp-style program on Great Barrier Island where child, youth and family sent difficult youths, and where many of these youths were abused by staff members or fellow residents. She says whakapakari met the criteria for a cult, with its charismatic leader, hierarchical structure, isolation from the outside world, and silencing of anyone speaking out. Ms Hill says military-style camps like the LSV programs can work, but only when the participants choose to be there.
If you're there as punishment, people view you as being needed to be punished, and that makes you less than. It makes you a target. People feel entitled to treat you badly, and that's where things start to go wrong.
Ms Hill says in light of historic abuse in state facilities like Whakapakari, the National Party needs to reassess their plans. But some of those who've participated in LSV courses hold hope the bootcamp model could work. Byron Gardner left high school before he could sit his Year 13 exams. He says the course at Auckland's Whenuapai base gave him a sense of accomplishment he couldn't find in the classroom.
All the students that I've seen come and go from there have changed drastically from being rather naughty, antisocial children to being well off and matured.
Mr Gardner went from LSV into another military preparation program, while many of his peers went straight into work. He says although the courses are voluntary, some people need an extra push to succeed. Andrew Rodwell's a former patron of the LSV course run out of the Burnham military camp in Canterbury. The program targets those at risk of long-term unemployment and takes them through basic military training, although Mr Rodwell says for some trainees, it was the basic life skills that left the biggest mark.
Some of these were dreadfully disadvantaged children. On day one, they were shown their bunk rooms. One kid was shown how to make a bed and were asked if they could make a bed, and they said no, they didn't know how to make a bed. And the instructor person said, "Oh, have you not been shown?" And the answer was, "No, I've actually never had a bed."
He says the camp was life-changing for its young participants.
I saw 125 kids get off a number of buses on day one who had attitude, and 6 weeks later, the majority of these kids that I spoke to anyway didn't want to leave.
Ms Hill says courses like LSV provide an opportunity for kids to experience the military style of life. She says there's no need to add yet another response to the youth offending problem, and has this to say to Christopher Luxon and his party.
People gave evidence to the Royal Commission. Sit and watch them, listen to them, and hear what they had to say, and revisit this. Think about what you're going to create and perpetuate by these boot camps.
The New Zealand Defence Force declined to comment on National's policy.
Tom Taylor reporting there. An elephant of an appetite's forcing Auckland Zoo to order in fast food foliage, that is. Burma, the Asian elephant, munches her way through kilos and kilos of plant treats every day. And to keep up, the zoo is asking home gardeners to survey the backyard for Burma bites. Senior elephant keeper at Auckland Zoo, Laurel Sandy, details the top treats.
For Burma, obviously vegetation is extremely important for her. It's her natural diet, and we want to feed as close to a natural diet as possible. So the more vegetation and variety of vegetation we can get her, the better it is for her. And also no one wants to eat the same thing every day. So having that variety is really important, both mentally as well as for her physiological needs.
So what is on the menu? What are you asking for?
She loves an array of things, which is great because that means there's hopefully a wider chance of us getting some of those things. So she absolutely loves bamboo, most of the species, but especially the really large cane, broadleaf, dark green bamboo, because she will eat the entire cane of that right down to absolutely nothing. Fig, or sort of different species within that ficus family. What else is really good? She loves all sorts of different things. Puka trees are absolutely delicious. And also she oak, which is also known as Casuarina. And then extra treats on the side are things like the banana palm, sugar cane. And even though they're a little bit on the sweet treats, we can sort of utilise that for different things where a really nice sort of high rewarding vegetation is a great way for her to enjoy that as well.
Posh stuff. It's posh stuff.
Is it? It is, maybe, a little bit. But she deserves it.
Absolutely. Now, I imagine an elephant can pack away quite a bit of food. What sort of volume are we talking about?
Well, she eats probably around the 150 kilo mark for food every day. And like I said, because we're trying...
Sorry, Laurel, say that again.
150 kilograms of food. And because, like I said, we're trying to feed a day, because we're trying to feed as close to a natural diet, the majority of that is vegetation. So you've got to remember that vegetation doesn't have a huge amount of calories. But she does eat everything from the leaves. She'll strip bark. She will eat entire branches and palm trunks and things like that. So she does get through it, and they all have different sort of purposes for her system. But elephants also have pretty poor digestive systems. So they tend to waste about 50% of everything they're eating. So half of it goes into fueling their body, so giving them energy, and the other half is wasted, which is why we pick up so much poo during our day.
Hey, so would you normally source some of that from around the grounds of the zoo, or are you always relying on a top-up from people donating stuff from their gardens?
We are lucky that the zoo is an amazing green space, and there is a fair amount of vegetation. Burma loves heading out for walks into some of the off-display areas, and seasonal changes mean that there's always a sort of a bit of a variety there. But because she does eat such a huge amount, we can't sustain that purely from our grounds. So we really do rely on our community to help us out and let us know when they do have excess plants growing in their garden that they need to either trim down or they want to remove completely. Then it's as simple as filling out the form on the Facebook page or even through our website link and letting them know that they've got some, and then the browse team get in touch with the community and head out there and grab it for us.
Okay, so that's what's on the menu of Burma Bites, but is there any no-goes? Because people use different kinds of stuff in their garden, like, you know, potentially sprays and things like that. What do they need to know?
Yeah, definitely. So we want nice, fresh, leafy greenery, but it definitely can't have been sprayed in any way, because obviously those toxins can stay in the food long after. So that includes things that may have been near where weed spraying is happening, or the plants themselves have been sprayed. So as long as they're fresh and they're looking in good condition and they line up with the list that's available on our Facebook post, then we're definitely interested.
Laurel, have you ever had just a quick little nibble on any of this stuff? Can you tell us what it's like?
Definitely. Well, two of her favourites are banana palm and sugarcane, and initially we assumed that was because they were both very sweet, but it actually turns out the banana palm is incredibly bitter. So they're actually a real chalk and cheese contrast between the two, but she loves them both very much. So we definitely like to try things and make sure that what she's getting is right for her, or why she might not be into something.
So you basically did have a little test and nibble on some of these things, so you could work it out.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have a
Find
personal...
out what the appeal is.
Any personal favourites?
I mean, I like puka. It looks like a tasty tree. It's quite a nice soft branch, and she really enjoys it. She loves the leaves as well as all the branches, so it's something that she can demolish completely. So that's definitely one of my favourites. I get really excited if I see a ute load of puka coming our way.
And there is a link to that website to register food donations. It's on our website. The cost of living crisis is forcing many to turn to food banks for help to get through. The Auckland City Mission says before COVID-19, it was providing about 500 food parcels a week for families. At the height of the outbreak, that rose to more than 2,000 parcels, and the need has not dropped. Jonty Dine reports.
Demand for food is soaring at the Auckland City Mission, with the charity currently providing 3 million meals a year.
It's something that is deeply disturbing.
Auckland City Missioner Helen Robinson says with Christmas around the corner, it's only going to get worse.
We're deep into preparation for what we call the 7 days of Christmas. So these are the 7 days before Christmas where the demand for food really is extraordinary.
Miss Robinson says the situation is dire.
There are many New Zealanders who just simply don't have enough money for food, and when that happens, people come to our door.
Head of Fundraising and Reputation Deborah Ward said last year they delivered 10,000 parcels of food in the weeks leading up to Christmas.
And almost 40,000 gifts for tamariki who otherwise would not have anything to open on Christmas Day.
And she says it is not just the vulnerable that are struggling.
We see more families now where they're a single parent, the parent is working 1 or 2 jobs. We see more families where both parents are working 1 or 2 jobs. They still cannot make ends meet.
The mission will rely on the community to fill the huge need this Christmas.
Food and toys are absolute gold at Christmas, and there are different ways that we do that, so people are very welcome to drop gifts and non-perishable food off to the mission.
Ms Ward says they are well placed to distribute to those in need.
We know where the need is greatest and what we need to spend the money on, so we can directly push that, whether it's baked beans that we're short of or whether it's pavs for Christmas Day that we want to give people.
Ms Ward says it's distressing to see how much their services are in demand.
I think what we're seeing at the mission is just the ongoing effects of poverty, the ongoing effects of trauma, and of people simply not having enough.
Ms Robinson says it is the great shame of the nation.
The call of the mission is to encourage our country to be brave and courageous and to step into our own shadows. One of those shadows is actually acknowledging the number of people who are hungry.
People can also donate to collection points at Auckland libraries, or money can be donated online.
Quick feedback now on the subject of 16-year-old voting. Brian from Ngā points out that 16-year-olds, if they buy anything, they pay tax via GST. So, they should be able to vote, says Brian. After the news at 6, we're going to be having, we'll let you know what the most popular dog names are. Evie, you've got dogs. What are they called?
Sophie and Elfie.
Wow, you might have just proven what we are going to look into.
Oh.
If the common old Fido and Rover have moved on and posh names are the new thing. Someone says Scooby-Doo, Lassie and Snoopy, George and Timmy, all classics.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. Police are reviewing charges after the death of the man stabbed in a Christchurch park while walking his dog. The man had been in a critical condition since he was attacked in Bexley Park near the Pages Road entrance on November the 14th. Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves says he died in Christchurch Hospital today. 18-year-old Bailey Masurvi appeared in court last week on a charge of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Solomon Islands authorities say it's too early to tell the extent of the damage caused by a series of shallow earthquakes off the coast of Guadalcanal. The first and strongest, at magnitude 7, was followed by a magnitude 6 and then 5.1 and 4.7 aftershocks. Brian Tom from the National Disaster Management Office says it's had reports of pieces of buildings falling onto cars and cracks on the ground and in buildings. Mr. Tom says residents should stay vigilant as there could be further damage.
There will be aftershocks coming following this earthquake. So we want to advise our citizens to just take extra care.
Brian Tom says power was cut in the Solomons capital, Honiara, but it has been restored. The Pacific Tsunami Centre issued a tsunami warning after the strongest quake, but subsequently withdrew it. But the Solomon Islands government says there was no tsunami threat, though people should expect unusual currents and move to higher ground. No tsunami warning was issued for New Zealand. A rescue operation is continuing on the main Indonesian island of Java after an earthquake killed dozens of people. Officials say hundreds more have been injured and many are still missing. Richard Kimber reports.
Rescuers worked through the night to try to save people thought to still be trapped under collapsed buildings. Officials say the recovery and evacuation effort is being hampered by poor mobile phone reception in the worst hit areas. It's unclear exactly how many people have been killed by the 5.6 magnitude quake. Initial estimates from local officials vary between 60 and 160. The area where the quake struck is densely populated and prone to landslides, with many houses reduced to piles of rubble. Local authorities say more than 13,000 people have been displaced by the disaster. It's expected that it could take up to 3 days for power to be fully restored to the area. Earthquakes are common in Indonesia. It sits on an area of tectonic plates in the Pacific known as the Ring of Fire.
13 United Nations member states have issued a statement condemning North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile launch on Friday. Officials say the missile landed about 200 kilometres from Japan's coast and had the range to reach the continental United States. William Denslow reports from UN headquarters in New York.
During Monday's Security Council meeting, the US ambassador to the UN urged member states to be united in their condemnation of Pyongyang. Then, following the meeting, 13 UN members issued a statement calling North Korea's recent ICBM launch an unequivocal threat to international peace and security. Pyongyang's fired over 60 missiles this year in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. But during Monday's meeting, China and Russia blamed existing sanctions and Washington's recent military drills for ratcheting up tensions on the Korean peninsula. Beijing's urged the US to turn its calls for dialogue from a formality into a reality.
Archives NZ has restarted its online search tool after a shutdown caused by restricted record titles mistakenly being made public. It has been investigating what it said was a potential security and privacy breach for more than a week. Archives says it's satisfied there has been no privacy breach from the records identified. RNZ is asking about any security breach. The agency says it's had issues with the search tool since it's installing it in February. The chief archivist, Anehira Morihu, says the recent issue has been resolved. She says the tool is critical and it's important to bring it back online as fast as possible. And Aucklanders are bracing as nasty thunderstorms approach the North Island. Auckland Transport issued a high wind alert for the Harbour Bridge before 4:30. Lanes could close between 8 o'clock and midnight tonight. AT advised high-sided vehicles and motorcyclists to avoid the bridge and use the Western Ring Route on State Highways 16 and 18. About 1,350 lightning strikes were recorded in the hour from noon over the Tasman Sea. The National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, NIWA, says some of the thunderstorms and showers could be nasty. Met Service forecasts gusts over 110 kilometres per hour and a few small tornadoes in isolated areas during this warning period. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, prison food reformers claim some prison food is so bad that it could be hampering the rehabilitation of inmates. Skincare lotions, moisturisers and the like, do we really need them? And which ingredients or products actually work and are backed up by science? And add the sampler for some new music and you're all set. On Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile with the RNZ app. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, Waikato, Bay of Plenty. Periods of rain, some heavy falls with thunderstorms and northerly gales. Showers becoming isolated tomorrow with strong westerlies. From Waipomo to Kapiti, also the central high country. Rain with possible thunderstorms and downpours spreading south this evening. Showers tomorrow, possibly thundery. Strong to gale northwesterlies in exposed places. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Waded Upper and Wellington. Areas of rain, possibly heavy. Clearing tomorrow morning, then late rain for Wellington. Northwest gales tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, isolated showers turning to rain this evening, becoming fine tomorrow morning, then rain returning in the evening. Bulla, Westland, Fiordland, periods of rain with heavy and possibly thundery falls. Canterbury, partly cloudy. Otago and Southland, showers possibly heavy. Thunderstorms possible during the afternoons and evenings. And Rekohu, Chatham Islands, rain developing tonight, clearing tomorrow evening. The time is coming up to 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Ngā mihi Evie, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Professional property managers want all landlords to be created equal when it comes to regulations for tenancies. The government's regulating residential property managers, saying it will improve protections for tenants. They'll have to be registered, trained and licensed, and complaints and disciplinary matters will be dealt with through a new regulatory framework. But the rules won't apply to private landlords who manage their own properties or kāinga ora property managers. David Pearce is the chairman of the Residential Property Managers Association and joins us now. Kia ora, David. What do you like about this plan to start with?
I like about the fact that we've been advocates of a regulation of property managers for forever, because at the end of the day there are too many cowboys and it's easy for someone to get in there to be a property manager and not do the job properly. It also has been a situation where there's been a lot of companies that employ property managers and throw them into the front line without having the knowledge that they need to actually be able to do the job properly.
So what are the cowboys and girls getting up to then that we need to know about?
Well, at the end of the day, there's owners who are ringing me regularly about they're not getting paid money. And, things are not being done. Inspections are not being done. They're just offering a sales program of cheap, promising everything, giving cheap fees and not doing anything. So, but again, these ones that are doing these things are giving us all a bad name. That will hopefully be sorted out with the regulation. But I must say I'm pretty gutted by what they've come up, the Labor government's come up with in the end.
So kāinga ora and private landlords are going to be excluded. What is the issue with that, in your view?
Well, at the end of the day, residential property managers are only at most 42% of the actual the rental stock. So you've actually got private landlords and people who are renting out properties that do not need to know anything about it to do properly. They get someone to actually find them a tenant, and then after that, this is where the big issues have come from. And we're getting constantly from phone calls from tenants and from owners who are wanting to get someone to manage it to find that they haven't even still lodged their bond. We've got these basic issues that are still there. And it's really, really disheartening because for 4 or 5 years we've been giving the government and advocating a system that would actually improve property management for everybody, every tenant and every owner if it's managed, and they just are not listening.
Do you think that private landlords who own just one property should be included in this?
It's a business and they need to lodge the bonds, they need to know what they do, they need to keep rent statements, and what we find is most are not doing it still, and under the system they won't. And with them going with the REA rather than MB as the regulator, it's shut the door on the ability to include private landlords later.
Okay, so explain that to people. The Real Estate Authority, under the government's plan, would be the property management police as such. Why don't you like that idea?
Well, at the end of the day, that's better than having than nothing. I just would have preferred MB because we actually could then have a system where we've been advocating the Rent Smart Wales for years. It's a model that would work really well in New Zealand, but they just seem to be all our explanations and advocacy, it just seems to be falling on deaf ears.
So do you think that the Real Estate Authority's got the resources to deal with expanded responsibilities?
Not at the moment, no. I don't think they do. They're going to have to learn the RTA. Because they're real estate doesn't mean to say they do. At the moment, when there's ever an issue with a real estate agent, they say, I'm sorry, we can't deal with that because property managers aren't regulated. At the end of the day, that just doesn't wash. And at the end of the day, we'll just have to work with it. But at the end of the day, I believe that there could have been a better option for New Zealand. But again, that it seems as they just wanted to drive towards that finish line, tick the box to say, look, we've met our pledge that property managers are regulated, but they've missed a huge opportunity.
Well, there's still an opportunity for you, isn't there? Because the Minister says she's open to submissions, and this is a change that wouldn't come in for, until 2026?
Yeah, but the key thing is the selection of the actual regulator. And by doing the REA, it actually stops the opportunity for private landlords to come in later. See, MB don't know how many rentals there are out there. They're only taking their knowledge and their guesswork on bonds, and we know that there's a huge percentage of private landlords are not lodging their bonds.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That's David Pearce, who's the chairman of the Residential Property Managers Association. The top dog names are out and there's not a Rufus to be seen. AA's released a list of the top 10 most popular dog names according to their pet insurance records. So armed with the list, our reporter Kate Green and cameraman Samuel Rillstone went to see if they could find any top dogs.
It's a dog's life on this Wellington beach, and out for a stroll is Coco, the only pooch we could find, whose name features in this year's top 10. She's a miniature schnauzer rescue dog from the Wellington charity Hoo-Ha, and her owner David says she certainly suits her name.
Yeah, I think it does. She's kind of cute and sprightly. She's very affectionate. They're a great breed, Schnauzer.
The most popular names list has been drawn up by AA Insurance from their pet data. Topping the list are Luna and Bella. Amanda is down at Island Bay with her retriever collie cross, Mabel. Mabel's not on the list, but Mabel knows a Bella.
Bella is nuts. She's a Bichon Shih Tzu, and she is a yappy little. She's hilarious. She has a pink, jeweled collar, and she her name's Bella Petronella.
I love.
And you can imagine what Bella's like.
Oh yeah, pampered.
She's so pampered.
Next on the list are Charlie and Molly. Kevin considered Molly, but settled on Millie for his 10-month-old Labrador.
Yeah, I toyed with a few names, Maya, Molly, Coco, being a chocolate lab, and I was just sort of vocalising them loud in the car, and I came up with Millie. And I think she suits it.
Rounding out the list are Cooper, Poppy, Nala, Milo and Bear, but some dog owners we meet have gone down a more unique path. Shaz has a huge mixed breed with a lumbering gait and a fear of water more than ankle deep. Tilk El Cabaron.
I really liked that Orca Tillicum, his Tillicum's colours. And El Cabaron is like, Cabaron in Arabic is large. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Took the big.
For many families, like Helen's, choosing a name is a democratic affair.
Well, my husband and I just kind of wrote lists, and Fergus was on both of his list and my list. And it's a good Scots name because I'm from Scotland originally.
Helen says Fergus spends much of his time with her in her art studio and only occasionally steps in the paint. Further down the beach, Harriet is busy throwing sticks for her family's golden retriever, Rizzo, named after the character from Greece. But she may be about to start a family argument.
Well, if my mum watches this, she'll be angry at me. She claims it was her idea, I claim it was mine. But I think we drew a name out of a hat. Each person in our family whose name got pulled out got to pick the name.
From where she's fetching sticks from the surf, Rizzo doesn't mind either way.
I love Fergus as a name for a dog. Love it. It's interesting to see how movies and TV series influence that. Bella, I'm picking it's from Twilight. Luna, Harry Potter. Nala, The Lion King. Some smart person has got in touch to say if they owned a dog, they would simply name it Stay. Feedback on other things. Healthy homes. This person says, I'm a private landlord and have no problem with further regulation to protect tenants' interests, but I really, really want further protection for landlords. For example, when tenants cause deliberate damage to our valuable investment properties, they should be evicted the next day, not able to delay and deny that it is vandalism. And another, Nick from Reefton, says, I'm a landlord of one small rental property, which is my retirement nest egg. I don't live nearby to attend the property myself, so need a property manager. I welcome proposed regulations so that I can be confident that both me and my good tenants are served professionally and in compliance with our mutual obligations under complex tenancy laws. And let's do a quick one on voting. Debbie says, all power to the 16 and 17-year-olds. I'm 52 and a mother of 3. Most of the 16 and 17-year-olds I know are far more informed and politically aware than the many older people who blindly vote for the same party each election with no idea of their policies. 2101 on text if you want to join the conversation. At the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, it's been a day dominated by politics off the pitch as well as the action on it. Iran's team refused to sing their country's national anthem in support of protesters back home. And as you heard earlier, England and other European teams abandoned plans to wear armbands in support of gay rights. It came after FIFA warned players they would receive a yellow card for such a protest. Lucy Hawkins has more from Doha.
It was an incredibly powerful and symbolic moment when the Iranian team stood there in silence as their national anthem rung out across the Khalifa Stadium. They were under a huge amount of pressure from the protest movement at home and abroad to make a statement, and this is what they chose to do in solidarity with the anti-regime protesters back in Iran. I was speaking to the head of Amnesty International, Dr. Agnes Kalaman, and she said it's very important that when fans are watching the match, they realise that the possible risk that those players took in making such a statement.
I want to tell them to think about the Iranian team, not just as the adversaries of a football game, but as young men who have taken an incredible risk today. They've taken an incredible risk by refusing to sing the anthem. I want them, the fan, to think about them, because when they're going to go back to Iran, they could get arrested, they could get tortured, they could get sentenced to death, as many protesters have been. 58 children in Iran have died. That cannot be evacuated from the stadium.
This is arguably the biggest platform in the world that the anti-regime protesters are going to have, the Football World Cup. And there are many Iranians who have big expectations of their players, and some living abroad who just want these players to do more.
I was watching some of the
reaction from people inside of Iran in social media, it's unbelievable. People are celebrating losing their own national team. So they were celebrating winning of England team against their national team. Why? Because they don't consider this team as their national team. They considered it as an Islamic Republic of team. Just remember, it was a couple days ago, these athletes went and shook the hand of the president of Iran, and the same hand that has cracked down hard those protesters. So these athletes have been under a lot of criticized, and so do I think that this is enough for people or for this athlete to make Iranian people happy? I don't know. We'll see what happens next few days. But I think people expect solidarity, while teenagers are getting killed and in this difficult situation.
The gunman who killed 5 people and injured at least 19 others at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs on Saturday will face multiple murder and hate crime charges. The club's owner says dozens of lives were saved by 2 people who disarmed the shooter and held him down. The suspect, who was arrested last year for threatening to bomb his mother's home, will be charged once he's out of hospital. CNN's Nick Watt filed this report.
Club Q is one of the only LGBTQ venues in this city. The community called it their safe space until Saturday, minutes before midnight.
I saw the outline of a man holding a rifle at the entrance of the club, just probably about 15 feet from me.
He was wearing a black hat, black shirt, and jeans.
Barrett Hudson was sitting near the door. He was shot 7 times.
There was a man in front of him. He put his hands up a little bit and took 2 steps back, and the dude just killed him. And that's when I took off running.
Among the dead, bartender Daniel Aston. His parents told the Denver Post he'd moved here to be near them. Another bartender, Derek Rump, also killed.
They were in so many ways polar opposites, but worked so well together. They were just amazing, and every bar should have a Daniel and a Derek.
The club's owners told the New York Times they've reviewed the security tapes, which show the shooter wearing a flak jacket and armed with, quote, tremendous firepower, a rifle and a handgun. 11:56 p.m. was the first 911 call. Midnight, the first officer arrived. 12:02, the suspect was detained.
One patron was able to wrestle a gun away from him and use that gun to disable him, not by shooting him, but by hitting him.
At least 2 club patrons were involved in taking the gunman down.
One of them was injured and is in the hospital. I'm waiting for an update on him.
As soon as they started counting out the bullet holes, I called my dad. He's like one of my best friend. We have a great relationship, and I called him, and that's because I wanted him to hear up. I wanted him to hear my voice.
Joshua Thurman was dancing, took cover in a dressing room.
Nobody knew we were back there. It was so scary. I heard shots, broken glass, bodies. Gosh, sir. It was... How? Why?
It is 22 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. In the UK, an experimental scheme is underway to revive endangered regional slang. A group of leading podcasters has agreed to sponsor words that the British Library says are on the brink of extinction. The BBC's Richard Hamilton reports.
Flenched is an old Scottish word for weather that promises to improve but never does. You might say scrammed up if you're in Devon and feeling very cold. And in Durham, blatherskite means gossip. Now campaigners are trying to resuscitate such threatened dialect words by encouraging their use among podcasters and regional broadcasters. The project was started by a company called Steady, which produces podcasts in consultation with the British Library. Johnny Robinson is the library's lead curator for spoken English.
We were approached by Steady to do a campaign kind of promoting and celebrating regional speech. They'd come across our collections. We've got a wonderful website called British Library Sounds, where we've got hundreds of hours of voices across time and in different geographic locations that celebrate regional accents and dialects. They wanted to get various podcasters to promote local words that are maybe considered rare or possibly obsolete. And so they used our resources to source about 25 words from across the UK and have asked podcasters to pick a word and kind of celebrate and explore that word and other words beyond.
Surveys of word usage were carried out in England, Scotland and Wales in the mid-20th century because of fears that dialect and regional grammar were in decline. Experts say local phrases give people a sense of identity and belonging. Diana Rackham is the chairman of FOND, or Friends of Norfolk Dialect.
Ones that are sort of in danger of extinction are perhaps things like, do you keep a troshin? Is a way that people use just as a term of endearment and getting people to keep going. But then there are things that are perhaps still in use today, but people don't necessarily realise that they're Norfolk dialect words. People often, if they come to Norfolk, they'll hear the word Bishy Barnaby or the phrase, it's on the her. A Bishy Barnaby, that's a ladybird. On the her, that means that something like a picture is hung slightly on the wonk.
Sometimes, she says, words can confuse people, but on the whole, like poetry, they enrich our experience of the world.
I can think of examples in my past that I've used that I thought were just a normal word. I didn't even realise it was perhaps a dialect word. Something like fosey. When I was at university, I opened the fridge, I looked at the carrots and I said, oh, the carrots have gone fosey. And the people I was living with didn't know what I was going on about. But to me, that was a word I'd just used all the time. Fosey is withered.
Linguists suggest that regional dialect words are particularly at risk as more of us now live further away from our place of birth. Others blame computer algorithms for reducing our vocabulary. It's hoped the project will keep this rich legacy alive for future generations so that they too can gaze at fosey carrots or indulge in some indiscreet northeastern blatherskite.
I had a fosey apple today and the weather in Auckland is pretty flinched. To the US now, where an Oregon couple are the proud new parents of twins, but the story has a twist. The babies could almost be as old as their parents. You see, Lydia and Timothy were born from embryos frozen 30 years ago. They're believed to be the longest frozen embryos ever to result in a live birth. CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta with the incredible story of the Ridgeways.
In April of 1992, more than 30 years ago, the world was a lot different. Bill Clinton was running for president. Phones looked like this. I was 23 years old. And at a small clinic, these embryos were frozen, suspended in time at nearly 200 degrees below zero, waiting patiently at the National Embryo Donation Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. That is until just a few weeks ago, when twins Timothy and Lydia were born to Rachel and Philip Ridgway of Oregon.
When we heard about embryo adoption, we thought that's something we would like to do, and it's something we think we're able to do.
Adoption refers to living children, and it's a judicial order. It's a legal process by which a parent-child relationship is created when it did not previously exist.
Dr. Sigal Klipstein is a fertility specialist in Chicago and chairs the American Society of Reproductive Medicine's Ethics Committee. She was not involved in the Ridgways case.
Embryo donation is a medical procedure. It's a way by which we take embryos from one couple or individual and then transfer them into another individual in order to build families.
Freezing embryos is not a new technique. In fact, the first baby born from a frozen embryo was back in 1984. But at a time when medical science has pushed the boundaries of life earlier and earlier, a new question has arisen. How late is too late?
Going into this process, we wanted to choose children that, in our eyes, were the most unwanted, the most needy, the ones in a lot of ways that have been overlooked.
Intentionally or not, the Ridgways have set a record. After 29 years and 10 months, the donated embryos are believed to be the oldest embryos ever to result in a live birth.
We weren't looking to get the oldest embryos that have been frozen the longest in the world. We just wanted the ones that have been waiting at the NEDC the longest.
NEDC is a faith-based center. The center says they have now facilitated more than 1,200 births through donated embryos. And according to the Society of Assisted Reproductive Medicine, the number of donated embryos has steadily climbed from about 1,000 a year in 2013 to about 2,100 in 2020, of which around 40% result in a live birth.
Dr. Gordon hands me a picture and I see the 3 of them, and then he said, multiples, can cause problems in pregnancy. And so he goes, so at this point, I would recommend just transferring 2. We'll put the 3rd in the freezer. You guys can come back for it. And so I looked back at Dr. Gordon and started to get teary-eyed and said, no, you've just showed me a picture of my 3 children. I have to have them all.
It's pretty remarkable. That's us for tonight. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. But tomorrow on First Up from 5 a.m, something pretty special. 11-year-old leukemia survivor Lucia Hurst, who was gifted Ruby Tui's World Cup Winners Medal, tells First Up she's been sleeping with it under her pillow. Tune in 5 a.m. tomorrow. It will lift your spirits and warm your heart. Have a great evening. We'll catch you tomorrow.
A cross-party committee of MPs has agreed to let Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky address Parliament before the end of the year. And the first refugees from Australian offshore detention camps have arrived in New Zealand. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7 o'clock.